Hello, my name is Katie Dunkirk. Welcome to this webinar on teaching children to self-soothe, where you're going to learn quite a lot in a short amount of time about the ways human bodies and brains react to perceived or real threats, about the role of memory in our reaction, and about how to use this knowledge to help you both understand your child's emotional reactions and help you teach them to self-regulate their emotions over time. You're also going to learn about the ways our bodies communicate our emotions with other people's bodies non-verbally, which is a key to why children will either co-regulate or co-dysregulate with their parents. And you'll learn my favorite tool for physically shifting out of a dysregulated state into regulation. This tool is something you can use anytime, anywhere. It's as simple as breathing. So you're in the right place if you're a parent or a teacher who is frustrated by your child's repeated behaviors, whether that is tantrums, whininess, general fear or anxiety, clinginess, or violent outbursts. And especially if you're also frustrated with your own reactions to those behaviors. Maybe you're trying to stop yelling at your kids, or trying to criticize less, or trying to be more present instead of checking out. So if you can relate to any of that, you're in the right place. And I'm excited you're here because after you're done with this training, you are going to know what's happening in both your and your child's body when you're having a strong emotional reaction. And you're going to know an incredibly effective tool to help you both regulate. And when you're regulated, it's so much easier to be the parent or teacher you want to be. So with that said, you might not have seen me or heard me before. I haven't been very active on social media up to this point, but that's because for the past decade plus, I've been in the classroom working with preschoolers and their families. And in the past 2 years, I have added to that a number of trainings and certifications to work with adults based in attachment theory and somatic therapy. I've also done a lot of reading about how bodies and brains work, process emotions, and heal from trauma. So I'm coming to you now with all of that accumulated knowledge and experience to break down some very complex topics and give you some practical ways that we can use this knowledge specifically in our relationships with our children. In this particular webinar, these 4 books were some of the main sources, and the relevant classes I've taken were from the therapeutic groups below. I highly recommend checking them all out for yourself. They are fantastically informative. So something I've noticed in the past couple years is that people have a large desire to find ways to teach children how to self-soothe or self-regulate. I see this in online content for parents and even as little laminated cards in classrooms, breathing exercises, counting exercises, movement breaks, using food or water to encourage children to slow down and take a breath. And these are good exercises, but they're only going to go so far because they don't get to the root of the issue. The root of the issue is that children learn how to self-regulate through thousands and thousands of experiences co-regulating with trusted adults. There is no shortcut. It is through us. They learn to self-regulate through us. Now, this might be frightening for some of you, especially if you're thinking, but I don't know if I ever learned to self-regulate. Don't worry, that's why we're here. That's why I'm so excited to share this webinar with you today. So let's dive in. I want to start by giving a very basic rundown on the way our bodies, both adult and child bodies, react to a perceived threat. One helpful image to think about is a ladder. This ladder has multiple names. You'll see 2 here, autonomic and polyvagal. They're describing the same thing. And in real life, you've probably heard these ideas talked about as fight, flight, or freeze, and maybe rest and digest. So this is all in reference to something that is happening in both our brains and our bodies, and it's all about safety. When people feel safe, we are in ventral vagal mode, and we want to connect with the world around us and other people. We want to laugh, we want to learn, we want to relax, or we want to work on something meaningful. We want to play, we want to create art, we want to sing. This is when we're most connected with the rational, creative, and empathetic parts of ourselves, closer to the front of the brain, which is why it's at the top of the ladder. Ideally, this is the part of the brain we're chilling in most of the time. Maybe not in reality, but ideally. The lower parts of the ladder are what happens when our brain perceives a threat. whether it is a real and present danger or whether it's a memory or something we're imagining. The central position is the sympathetic nervous system response, fight or flight. This response is meant to help us get out of immediate danger, fight the predator or run from it, right? This is associated with the amygdala, which is part of the part of the brain responsible for many of our emotional responses. It's also the part of the brain that screens all the information we take in with our senses and scans for potential threats before the information gets up to the rational parts of the brain. So, because this is a lower part of the brain, we physically have an emotional response before we have a rational one. This is an important thing to remember for later. So, when we're in ventral vagal, top of the ladder, we've got all this blood directed to the thinking parts of our brain and to our major organs, rest and digest. When we're in sympathetic, our heart starts racing. Blood is sent to our arms and legs so we can run away or fight. And blood is sent out of the rational thinking parts of the brain. We are actually less able to hear and understand human voices when we are in this mode because our ears are tuned into low frequencies like the growl of a tiger or extremely high frequencies like human screaming. We also perceive neutral facial expressions as hostile when we're in this mode. So you can probably see already why this is a very helpful automatic response when a bear attacks your camp, but less so when the threat that's setting off your sympathetic fight or flight response is a screaming toddler. When we're in the sympathetic response frequency, this is a real drain on our adrenal systems because we are prompting an adrenaline response every time we're in that mode. That adrenaline doesn't just leave the body immediately. So accumulated adrenaline can build up in the bloodstream, and over time, that can look like anxiety. The lowest section on the ladder is dorsal vagal, which you might know as freeze. This is when our threat response system has decided the situation is so dire that there is no point in fighting or fleeing, and that our energy would be better used in shutting down our system so we're numb to whatever attack is happening. This is the lowest part of the brain, near the brainstem. And if you look at these descriptors here, extreme stress, absence of joy, grief, numb, stuckness, sounds kind of like depression, right? We could think of depression as a sort of extended freeze response. When we feel so overwhelmed, so unsafe, so habitually over time, freeze can become our habitual mode of being. We're just numb and exhausted because our system is not meant to work on dorsal vagal over time. The way our brains communicate these threat responses through the body is through the vagus nerve, dorsal vagal, ventral vagal, vagus. This is something I can go more deeply into another time, and the resources that I listed that will be in the notes, some of those have the vagus nerve as one of the main features, the polyvagal theory and my grandmother's hands in particular. But in short, this is the nerve that extends through our body, all around our internal organs, into our limbs, and it's the reason that we feel emotions as physical sensations in the body. Like if you ever felt your gut tightening when you're stressed or felt a heaviness in your chest when you experience grief, that is because of your vagus nerve. The other really fascinating thing about the way our bodies process emotion, the vagus nerve, and our social connection systems is that our bodies actually project our emotions several feet out from us. So if you ever walked into a room and felt tension, or you've been in an environment where you can just feel excitement in the air, like backstage at a play or at a big sporting event, that is real. You're physically picking up on the emotions of the people around you. And when it comes to children, they are more susceptible to our emotions than we are to theirs. There have been studies linking elementary and preschool teachers' cortisol levels to their students, and the studies find that children's cortisol levels match the teachers, not the other way around. So we, adults, actually have quite a bit of influence here. Whatever our emotional state is, we project that onto the children in our presence, whether we want to or not, whether we're aware of it or not. That's why I'm going to be sharing that exercise with you in a little bit here, because it was designed to help us regulate our emotions so we can project that regulation to the others around us. And this slide actually shows the impact of that exercise, not between two people, but as you can see from the title, between a boy and his dog. So this is a boy who had practiced a version of this exercise I'm going to be teaching you. And scientists put monitors on both the boy and the dog and had them in separate rooms. Then asked the boy to go into the room with Mabel, the dog, and practice the exercise. And what you see there in the middle is when the boy started to do the exercise, he regulated not only his own heart rhythms, but also the dog's. And this is particularly powerful when you have a strong bond with the person or the dog that you're with. And this heart rhythm is very closely linked to what's happening in the brain and also what's happening emotionally. So we'll come back to that exercise after I give you a little more information. So what creates a threat response? Remember, we talked about the amygdala as one of the emotional centers of the brain. It is also the part of the brain that encodes our memories with emotional importance. So sometimes the amygdala perceives a threat and it is right on. But sometimes the amygdala perceives a threat that reminds it of a threat from our past. And sometimes the amygdala perceives something that reminds it of fears we have of a potential future. But the body responds the same way to all three situations, whether the threat is real and present in front of you or whether it's a memory or something you imagined. And before that information has even gotten to the prefrontal cortex where you think rationally, the amygdala has already sent the body into a threat response. This probably rings very true. How many times have you had a reaction that you look back at later in confusion? That's because our emotions aren't logical, but they are real. They are real chemicals that course through our bodies, and they impact our mood, our behavior, even where our blood is flowing. If you've taken Circle of Security with me, you probably recognize this concept as shark music. Like, imagine the theme song from Jaws. It's kind of like that music is playing in the background, but you're at the playground or Christmas dinner. So there's an ominous feeling to having that music in the background, right? So there are multiple terms for this concept, but one that makes a lot of sense to me is emotional stories. We tell ourselves stories about what's happening that makes it feel like a threat, even if it isn't, or if we can't know that yet. And then we respond like it's a threat. And if it feels like that threat is coming from our partner or our child, that can look like yelling at them or snapping at them, storming off, disappearing into a phone. And there's a reason we do this. It is protective. The threat in our mind might be a threat to ourselves, or it might be a threat to our child. So we react in a way that is trying to protect ourselves or our child. This might look like someone who gets really upset at their child's teacher at parent-teacher conferences because the teacher says something that the parent perceives as an insult to their child. This might look like a dad who's afraid to take his child to a birthday party because he worries how the child will behave, but also he worries about how his child's behavior will reflect on him. He worries maybe he'll be judged or thought of as a bad dad. This also might look like a mom who has a lot of stress and anxiety at drop off in the morning because of the fear she has about her child having trouble making friends. But maybe that's a really deep fear that goes back to when mom had trouble making friends when she was in school. I want to remind you, in case anyone is feeling a little down on yourself right now about the way you've reacted in the past when you were in a protective response, that our brains physically sort emotion through our emotional centers first, before sending them to the logical centers of the brain. In this slide, you see how visual stimuli is sent from the retina to the thalamus and immediately to the amygdala before it goes to the thinking centers of the brain. That is how it works for everyone. You're not a bad parent or a bad person for having emotional reactions to the stories that you carry. The fact that you're here watching this video, trying to learn how to help your child, actually means you're a good parent. So please be gentle with yourself. Often, these fearful stories don't even come from us. They were passed down to us from our own parents, and maybe they were passed down from their parents before that. You might have heard of this concept referred to as inherited trauma. The stress and anxiety that we feel, as we've seen, is shared with our children, and it becomes theirs. And if they don't take the time to make new neural connections, they will keep those same fears and pass them down to their own children. I'm sure many of you are now worried that you are passing on all your anxieties to your children, but I want to bring you back and remind you that we are here to learn a tool to stop that cycle in its tracks and start a new pattern. So let's get into that now. I like to think of this as recalibrating. So it's 3 steps. First, catch your protective response, your emotional story. 2, pause, or heart focused breathing and pause. You're kind of doing that at the same time. So you catch your protective response, start the heart focused breathing, and pause and decide what is going to happen next. So let's practice this right now. I want you to think of a recent moment, maybe in the past few days, when you had a protective response. Remember what was happening. What started the protective response? Try to notice if you were telling yourself an emotional story. Try to notice what you're feeling right now. Is your heart rate increasing as you think about it? Are you breathing shallowly? Right now, we're not trying to change anything, we're just noticing. Do you feel stress or tension anywhere, maybe in your shoulders or your stomach or your jaw? It's kind of amazing how we can bring ourselves right back to a moment just by thinking about it, isn't it? So this is when we're recalibrating, when we realize that our mood is shifting, and we feel like we might be on the verge of a reaction, and we want to redirect our own energy to be the parent we want to be in that moment, or the teacher you want to be in that moment. So thinking of that moment when you had a protective response, when you recognize yourself in this state, this is when we pause. And this is when we shift our attention, and we're going to do an exercise called heart focused breathing. And I love heart focused breathing because it is meant to be used in the moment. So you don't need to close your eyes. In fact, it might be better if you don't, because in the moment, when you're on the playground dealing with a defiant preschooler or driving with a screaming toddler, you're not going to be able to close your eyes, right? So feel free to have a soft gaze. Maybe you try and look at something pleasant in the room around you. Feel free to take your attention away from the screen. We're just going to do this for about 10 breaths together. And I breathe slowly. So if you finish before me, just keep taking deep breaths into your heart. Ready? Focus your attention in the area of the heart. You can place your hand there if it helps you, but you don't have to. Imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual. Find an easy rhythm that's comfortable. Okay, that was about 10 breaths for me. Please let me know in the comments how that felt for you. So there's a lot happening when we do heart focused breathing, but one of the primary things that's happening is we are sending more blood to the front of the brain, the calm, logical part of the brain. So we are physically moving ourselves out of that amygdala, adrenalized protective state. And there are a lot of other physical benefits of this exercise that I can go into at another time. But a cool one a mom told me once is that when she does heart focused breathing, when she's pumping, she produces more milk. So when you try it out, I would actually love to hear in the comments what other sorts of physical, mental, or emotional responses you notice. And remember the chart with the boy and his dog. When we shift our state, we are also going to be helping anyone who's close to us shift their own states too. So practically speaking, how do I use this exercise? Honestly, I use it all the time. I use it when I'm sitting in traffic to soothe myself. I use it when I'm having a hard conversation with a family member. With children, I try to recalibrate the second I start to notice myself getting irritated. That's something I really want to encourage. It can be really easy for us to let little irritations go on and on until they become too big for us to ignore anymore, and that's when we blow up. So the goal is to catch ourselves getting irritated and pause and start breathing into your heart right then. I think a lot of adults, particularly those of us who care for children, have grown accustomed to ignoring our own needs and feelings. So this exercise is an invitation to check in with yourself and notice when you need something. And it's a practice of trying to notice those feelings as soon as they come up, whether you're irritated at the first whiny tone you hear, or the first time one kid grabs something from another, or the first time your toddler ignores you. Take a deep breath into your heart right then. And if you miss that first moment, no worries. Start the heart focused breathing as soon as you notice your agitation. It's even more effective if you first name for yourself what you're feeling. Just thinking the thought, I'm annoyed, can be enough to start to shift you out of the emotional response into a rational one. And I want to say this as well. There is no blame to being annoyed. It is okay if you feel annoyed or even angry at your kids. Kids are practically perfect machines of being annoying sometimes, just by the nature of the sounds they make, the repetitive nature of their behavior. Even worse when they're antagonizing a sibling or something. Their behavior is less annoying when you know the purpose of it, and the purpose of all children's behavior, so you know, is to meet a need. And another time I can go deeper into what children's needs are, which will explain some of their behavior, and that makes it feel less annoying to me. But that's not the topic for today. So today, we just accept that sometimes they can be irritating and just try not to get mad at ourselves for our feelings. It's okay to be annoyed sometimes. And like I said, the sooner you name the feeling, quicker you work your way out of being in the feeling. Because when you admit to yourself that there's a problem, you're able to decide what the solution is going to be. So name that feeling, take a deep breath into your heart, and if there's no emergency, if no one is about to be hurt or hurt someone else, this is the moment to pause. This gives you the opportunity to think about what you're going to do next, to make a decision and act instead of having an automatic reaction. And because you have now been recalibrating, you've named your feelings for yourself, you've taken a moment to self-regulate with the heart-focused breathing, and you've continued to take more moments to give yourself a chance to slow down and decide on your action. Now you're going to be in a different mental space where you are better able to handle what's in front of you. So now you get to decide what to do. One, you might decide, actually, nothing is wrong. And you are going to manage the discomfort that you are feeling while you let your child do something that scares you a little. Maybe that's climbing a tree or interacting with a new friend or even coming to you in tears. If you decide that your child's behavior is in service of their need to explore the world or their need to connect with you, it's a good option to manage your feelings and allow your child to do what they need to do. Second option, you might decide that nothing is dangerous, but something is bothering you and you want to make a change, and that's okay. Now that you're calmer, you can make that change kindly and firmly, say asking your child to use a different tone of voice or maybe stop making a certain sound. And the third option, you might decide that something really is unsafe and you need your child to stop playing that game right now. But with your system in ventral vagal mode, you might convey this message in a silly way or distract them with a new game, avoiding an argument entirely because since you've done this exercise, you have access to the creative part of your brain again. One situation where I use the later tool, the heart focused breathing, all the time is when dealing with tantrums. Kids who are totally inconsolable, crying, screaming, kicking, fully in their sympathetic response. Remember what I said before about sympathetic response, fight or flight. The blood has left the rational centers of their brains. They cannot hear your words, and the words that do get through are not processed through the logical part of their brain. They're seeing your face is more aggressive than it is. They need help coming back to ventral vagal before they're going to be able to hear you again. You might have noticed that when your child's in a tantrum, they're not logical. Once I was carrying a child to a quiet spot to sit while he was having a tantrum, and in the process, he kicked off his shoes. And he screamed and screamed at me that I had dropped his shoes. which is not true. He kicked him off, but whatever. But when I gave him back the shoes, he threw them immediately. It wasn't about the shoes at all. He was just upset. And he didn't know why, because he was 3 years old and he needed me as the adult to help him stay safe, not hurt anybody while he calmed down. So now that I know that tool, when I'm helping a child who has become completely overwhelmed with their emotions, this is what I'm doing. I'm holding them as gently as I can to keep them safe and to physically soothe their nervous system. And I am focusing on my deep breaths into my heart so that I am regulating myself and passing that regulation on to them. And I'm waiting because I know that the feelings will pass and I trust that. And I'm not going to let myself get caught up in the child's big feelings. I am going to guide them back to feeling okay again. And I can tell you this, it always works. They always come back. When they start taking deep breaths, yawning, relaxing into your arms, that's a sign they're coming out of that sympathetic response. They're coming back to ventral vagal. You'll be able to see their beautiful smile and hear their darling laugh again. And they're getting to a place where they might be able to talk about what happened and what might work better next time. And after about the 1,000 times of you keeping your cool while your child has a difficult feeling, they are going to be a lot more aware of their feelings. They're going to know that feelings don't last forever and that you can handle their feelings and still love them. And they will have had your beautiful example of self-soothing to model themselves after. And the more you practice this tool, the easier it will be for you to regulate your own emotional state and be the parent or teacher you really want to be. That brings us to the end of this webinar on how to help children learn to self-soothe. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope to talk to you again soon. I actually have a part 2 of this exercise that I would like to share, and I will be uploading that in a few days, but I wanted to give you some time to use this one first before I add to it. So please feel free to tell me in the comments how this worked for you and keep an eye out for part 2 next week. Bye.